Hey, welcome back everyone to another live stream. This is Ira Wolfe. Let me get this off the screen. There we are. So this is Ira Wolfe, and I'm here today with Ryan Kohler from Applicant Pro. Good to see you again, Ryan.
Yeah, good to see you, Ira.
Yeah, hey, thanks. So I got to switch off a couple buttons. As anybody knows, there's like a million things on the dashboard here. There we go. So we can get our names up. We're going to be talking about what I've called hidden in plain sight. It's about some of the recruitment metrics that are absolutely essential. This conversation with Ryan started just a few weeks ago, and I was looking over some reports for my clients, sort of the end of the year, going over things of how things were going. Some of them were up for renewal, but looking to how they can improve their talent acquisition, the candidates. And I discovered a few things from clients that we're tracking. Not everyone does a good job at tracking everything. Well, they do a great job at tracking it. They just don't always run the reports or do a few minor things that they need to do. So I connected with Ryan, who basically is the engine, the genius behind our platform. Of the applicants, we use Preview APS, but Applicant Pro, and so we were looking at that. I was just looking for different ways that was I onto something? Was there a trend? How can we help people do it better? But before I get there, I actually created a slide just so I remember to make all the announcements I had to make. So one is, and this just came out minutes before the show, so this is a hastily put together slide. But I want to thank Summary.ai for those of you who have been listening to the podcast Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization. A few months ago, you heard Erin Michelson from Summary. She's got the KIND profile, the KIND quiz, and we had everyone participate, and it's still available. I will make sure this is available to everybody on the feeds. But everybody who completed it, there was a couple hundred people. They made a collective donation because it's AI driven. It looks at everybody's responses, and they found out that all the people who participated, our collective kindness cohort was empathy. Our community focus was actually community as opposed to global or some other things. And our collective interest was again locally generated, and the donation was made to Dunia Project. It's an after-school project in New York and Morocco and a few other places. So not going to spend a lot of time on how you can get the profile, but I just want to thank Summary and make sure that you know that you can still take the KIND quiz. It's really cool looking at, especially at culture, if you're evaluating what your culture is, where the collective goals and emphasis and values of the people within your organization, not necessarily management, but the people within your organization. My book, Recruiting in the Age of Googleization, edition 2.0, the second edition, came out at the beginning of February. You can get it for free yet. While supplies, I pre-purchased a bunch, and I want people to get it in their hands. So you can go to join.googleizationnation.com. Get your free book, no obligation. Just go up and register for it, and you'll get a digital copy, and within 7 to 10 business days, you'll get a paperback. You can also just go to our community where we do updates and announcements about live streams like this. My candidate experience online course is live. We moved it over to a new platform. There's the link, irawolf.heightsplatform.com. It is eligible for SHRM PDC credits, and hopefully we're going to add the HRCI shortly. But it is eligible for that, so you can go up and take a look around. And I'm adding new content at least weekly. And so far, there's about 15 lessons. By the end of next week, there should be about 30 lessons. And then after that, I'll probably be adding one every week. So some of the things we're talking about today, and this will probably put up there as well. And then finally, this is important because everybody's focused on the coronavirus, COVID-19. Our Geeks, Geezers, Googleization podcast, and this was totally coincidental. Our guest tomorrow was scheduled. We're going to talk about employment brand, but his expertise is crisis management, reputation management. And so we were going to be spending time on how your company can focus, and I'm sure this will have an effect on how you handle the not necessarily media, but how you handle your employees and do they feel comfortable and secure. It's going to affect employee brand, which ultimately is going to affect your ratings on Glassdoor and Indeed and Kununu and anywhere else, and ultimately is going to affect your talent acquisition. So now that we got that out of the way, we'll come back to Ryan and me. So, Ryan, you heard, we started this conversation. I've known you for quite a while. I started the conversation a few weeks ago about what the top sites are, the top sources. And I don't want to quite go there yet, but I did prepare this slide. So there it goes. Of metrics. And I know what I love about the system that you have, and again, I've been using it for quite a few years, is that these are pretty basic metrics that people should be tracking. And again, obviously, we want everybody to use Preview APS and the Applicant Pro, but whatever system you're using, there's a lot of good vendors out there, good ATS providers, HIRS. Whatever platform you're using, these are pretty basic. And I find that most people only track completed applications. They know how many applications they get. And they may or may not have a good filter system to find how many people met the basic qualifications. Using the interview questions and especially the point system that I insist that you put in. I use that all the time. It helps on meeting basic qualifications. But most people aren't documenting the rest of this. In fact, most people don't even know how to track starts of applications, how many people start but drop out, or they don't collect how many people actually see their job posting. If they're not getting enough people, there's an assumption that it's just a lousy labor market, or those darn millennials just aren't interested in working. Or whatever other almost excuse that they comes out with. So that's my take. You see a lot more people coming through, a lot more clients, especially since this is your area of expertise. What are you seeing? I mean, is it still most people just track completed applications and maybe qualifications and don't bother doing the rest?
Yeah, so I mean, clearly I look at the top of the funnel to begin in, and if you take your metrics across here, and clearly I lay them out a little bit differently. I stack them vertically because it is like a funnel. And right. Most of this has to do with kind of my approach. Like I got this like hire hacker shirt on today. I'm what's called a growth hacker. And growth hackers from a business standpoint are kind of like David versus Goliath. And the way we use metrics is a little different. And I think sometimes when we talk about metrics, there's a handful of problems with it. Number one is they may not be tracking pre-application, meaning starts or views. And a lot of that's because the ATS systems weren't designed for that because nobody asked them to, right? Like no HR people asked them to do that beforehand because of a whole lot of inherent beliefs like, hey, we believe that if there's qualified people, they'll apply, and if they don't apply, then they're not interested in our job. And there's nothing we can do to improve it. And a marketer or a growth hacker doesn't accept that premise at all. They look at it and they say, hey, we're going to figure out what we can do to drive more response in. It's just there's a handful of problem sets. If you don't track metrics, then you don't ask providers to build metrics. If you don't actually do anything with the metrics, meaning if you're tracking them just to have them, but you're not actually trying to improve them, then you don't dig into them and kind of get your hands dirty around them. To figure out how to make them work better. And what you have, I would say, across the board in the hiring world and in the HR space for a long period of time, especially in the SMB crowd, is a feeling that we get what we get. Meaning like if we post a job out there in the world, that if there's people who are qualified, they will apply. And if they don't apply, then it means they're not qualified or they're not interested. And there's really nothing we can do to change that. And if that is your core belief, that there's nothing you can do to change the output, then you really have no reason to track any of the inputs or the funnel, because you just simply believe there's nothing you can do about it. So a lot of times I thought, well, maybe it's just, a lot of HR people tend to not be mathematicians. They tend to not be as metrically aggressive. Right. And, you flip that around. One of the challenges I actually have is when they dig into the metrics, they want to be too precise. And views is a great example. It's really hard to track job ad views on Indeed. And so when they land on your career site, you can track it. But if the job seeker never lands on your career site, then you can't track it at all. And so we get really precise with our measurements, which misses a lot of the point of what is it? It's like perfection over progress. We have to be willing to track good metrics, but allow good enough. To me, metrics is about consistency. Track them the same way each time, not about perfection. We've tracked every single thing. But you're right. I believe it's less about whether they have access to the metrics and whether they would track them or not, and more about the motivators. Why would they do it? And if there's no motivator to track and improve, and there's no belief that you can impact the outcome, then we just stall out. It just doesn't happen.
But these are pretty basic. And again, going back to if we all hear it. I mean, unfortunately, it's keeping us in business, and we're doing well because of it. People are really struggling to find people, and yet I think you're right that they accept that it's just a bad labor market. One of the clients that's on the system and is in Hawaii. I mean, the unemployment rate, the state unemployment rate, is 1.6%.
Okay,
state unemployment.
Let's hang on. Let me hop on my soapbox for 2 seconds. I have this question I now ask everywhere I speak, because people bring that up and they'll say the labor market's tight. They'll use unemployment as proof that there's a lack of qualified applicant flow. And the only question I ask every single person is, back when unemployment was high, were you hiring unemployed people? And almost everybody says no. When unemployment's 8%, we didn't hire unemployed people either, unless you're like bottom of the market call center, hard labor, blue collar worker. Most companies filter out unemployed people before they reach the hire point. They might not in the application process, but during the interview process, we as managers, as humans, as business people, have a propensity to discriminate against unemployed people. Not discriminate like illegally, but discriminate like, why are they out of work? They've been out of work too long. Why did they get fired? Why did they get laid off? And so there's an easy correlation. It's kind of, if you think about this talent shortage, we speak in terms of macroeconomic factors: unemployment, tight labor market, high cost of living, shortage of HVAC workers versus total workers. We speak in macroeconomic terms. That is not a problem for the employer, because they can't solve it anyway.
Correct.
The employer is what we have is a war for talent, a competition. Mm-hmm. We have a competition for talent. If I'm in Hawaii, I guarantee I could get qualified workers for my job. The math is wrong. The math we use is like how many available workers are unemployed, or like there's 80,000 HVAC technician jobs, but only like 60,000 trained workers. The math is I need to hire 3 people, and there's 3,000 people in my local area that could do the job. And when you do the math that way, those 3,000 just work for somebody else.
Right. So I totally agree with you. I talk about the numbers just from a comparison, because people say, well, do you want to know what our unemployment rate is? It's 3.6%, or it's 2.6%, or how hard it is to find college grads or engineers or specialties. Sure. And I say, listen, there's a client that I've got in Hawaii. Unemployment rate it used to be 1.6. It might even been lower now. They're in the healthcare business, so you can imagine what it might be in healthcare. And here's what we found when they got converted to the system and started the ability just to be able to track some of these numbers. This wasn't where I was headed, but your setup really answered it. Is that they were, I was a little concerned. It was like, can I really help these people at 1.6% unemployment in a healthcare business and finding people for CNAs and RNs, and I mean really tough to fill jobs, domestically, internationally. Tough to fill jobs. And the first thing we found is their application was way, way too long. And I was able to prove that to them by this. They were saying, we're just not getting enough applications. And I saying, but do you have any idea how many people start your application and drop out? And I was able to easily demonstrate that they had like an 85, maybe a 90%. In some of the jobs they had, especially the lower level jobs, and they still had this 5-page application for the hourly positions, they had a 92% incompletion rate. 92% of the people dropped out. So we convinced them pretty quickly, almost overnight, that they needed to have a shorter application, maybe a 2-stage application. So their problem wasn't that people weren't interested in working for them, because they had a good reputation. Their employment brand wasn't a problem, is that they were weeding people out through their own doing. They were tripping over their own feet. And then the next part is let's look at what views do you have? And they were pouring a lot of money into Indeed and, sponsored ad. And we found that they weren't getting quality people from them. They were getting more interviews, but they weren't actually doing a high percentage of hires from that. So just having these basic numbers is I say this facetiously to every audience that I speak, is that the good news is most companies are doing a really, really bad job at talent acquisition, at hiring, at candidate experience. Last week's Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization, we had Kevin Grossman and Jerry Crispin from the Talent Board on there. Over the last few years, literally billions of dollars is spent on HR technology, people analytics, people going to conferences trying to do this. And after all that's said and done, the candidate resentment, not just dissatisfaction, candidate resentment went up 40%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's mind-boggling. So there's the whole other part of people. There's also that 70% of people are disengaged. 50% of people said within 12 months they're going to look for another job. Even though the unemployment rate's low, as you're going back to your point, people have jobs, but they're not happy in them. They will easily come to you if you don't make it so difficult. Not to make it easy to get a job, but you have to get the friction out of the way. You have to get all that.
Here's what the problem is that we're treating symptoms instead of the disease, right? And if you keep treating symptoms and you keep buying software and you keep trying to change things and adjust things without treating the actual disease, the actual core problem, because everything I talk about, whether it's metrics or growth hacking and hire hacking tactics and job ads, you name it, all comes back to one simple cure that has to happen. And that is that, in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when we started actually just think back what happened, say, pre-1800. There weren't companies with employees. There were shop owners and they had their friends work for them, but there weren't companies with employees. But when we started companies with employees, we set this structure that was, I, as the company, am the customer. Because I have the money, the job seeker is a cog in my wheel. That job seeker is the person, the vendor, who has to sell their wares to me. And we have continued that concept that because we have the money, we are the customer. And if you want to outcompete all the competitors and you want to never feel talent shortage again, you change one simple paradigm. The job seeker is the customer. I am the vendor and the job is the product. And you will be the only one who approaches that way, because then everything becomes clear. Would Amazon ever in their right mind make it hard to buy? No. Would they ever post out some giant bullet list of every boring topic and every boring minute detail of their product? No. Would they not care about what people say about them? No. Would they not care? If you believe the job seeker is the customer, would they not understand the customer or ignore them? No. They would never create a product without talking to the customer first. They would never create ads without testing them with customers. They would never make it harder to buy. They would never do any of those things. And if you switch that paradigm, if you can get them to open their eyes, they'll suddenly say, well, crap, if this is our product, it's a terrible product. I was on the phone with, bless their heart, with HVAC client. We were interviewing them, and I'm like, so your job ad says PTO. So I have a question. How much? And the lady's like, yeah, just don't talk about that. It's not great. I'm like, awesome. Your product sucks. Go tell you what product sucks. Go compare it to everybody else's product. And you'll find it's not as good. So make a better product. And guess what will happen? Your customers, job seekers, will quit their jobs and come work for you. But no matter how many metrics you look at, but you're right, like industry standard, I think is like a 50 to 60% dropout rate on starts versus completes.
Mm-hmm.
That, you reverse that. If you make it easy to apply, you double your applicant flow instantly, twice as many applicants. Right. But that requires you believing that people aren't finishing because you made it hard to buy, instead of you thinking people aren't finishing because they suck, because they're not qualified, because they're not that engaged in the job. And all of that comes back to, who are you? I mean, are you Google and Facebook? The average employer approaches the world like they are the greatest thing since sliced bread, and they're not. My company, Applicant Pro, is an awesome place to work. I get tons of applicant flow. I can tell you my secrets of how I do it, but yet I'm still not the best place to work in Utah. And I don't approach the employment world with this level of arrogance, like people want to work for me and I have this great thing to offer that they can't get anywhere else because they can get it everywhere else. Right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's still an attitude that, hey, we pay as well or slightly better than anybody else, and that's all we need to do. And it's not about that. And then they blame the millennials.
Well,
it's like, well, they don't want to work. It's not about the money. They just want a lifestyle. Well, it's all of that. And believe me, millennials, every generation wants to work. Millennials are some of the hardest working people that I know, if you provide them an environment which is not filled with animosity and discredit and bullying and whatever else we want to throw out there.
It's not that hard. If you believe this is marketing, then you simply need to understand your target market. Mm-hmm. When you understand your target market, you can design phenomenal products that they'll want to buy and then they'll want to keep buying. But if you look at your application metrics, and I know that's what you wanted to talk about, there is one more caveat. We can show some of the metrics, but there's one, we'll call it two huge caveats in all of this stuff. You should track your own metrics, and you should benchmark them today versus tomorrow, right? Mm-hmm. Every day you should be trying to get 1% better. What HR actually wants is like industry standards and best practices. Here's the problem. If everybody sucks, then the best practice in the is going to show that you're doing it wrong. If there aren't enough people using great sources, then best practice and industry standard will tell you that those sources don't work, not because they don't work, but because nobody's doing it. HR is full of skeptics, late stage adopters. There are no people who lead out. There's no early adopters. There's not people who create trends because of compliance, because of trying to make sure we don't get sued. We tend to be a bunch of skeptical late stage adopters, which means even if something is new and awesome, it never gets any footing. It never becomes a trend, so it can never become a best practice. And so even when you look at data, if I pull all my clients' data together, I have to caveat every time and say, hey, by the way, I don't believe my clients are early adopters of anything.
It's funny. You bring up, as you're talking, all these stories are coming back. It's almost 20 years ago. The .com boom. We were in a similar, there were different dynamics because at that point there were a lot of people coming into the workworkse. We had Gen X, millennials were just coming in. So we had this flood of people entering the workforce. And yet the economy was booming. We were creating 200, 300, even 400,000 jobs a month with that. And I was sitting on the board of a hospital at the time. It was before I became the vice president, but I was sitting on the board. And I remember them having a great deal of difficulty with RNs. And they had to, on weekends, they were doing contract work. And the RNs were getting 3 and 4 and 5 times hourly rates because it was that competitive. It was before they opened a lot of new nursing schools and sort of got their act together. So they basically, I said, well, what we can do is raise everybody's rates 1%, $1 or $2, and that's a temporary fix or give a bonus, but that's a temporary fix. But somebody's going to then increase it $4 or $5 or $100 bonus instead of $50. So the challenge was we need to look at where, as you said, where are the people coming from? Why are they leaving? Why don't they want to work here? And the bar was set really low. But going back to that interesting average, they said every hospital has this problem because we're actually in the top 10 percentile of comparable hospitals. And I said, great. It's like, how's that working for us?
Right.
And it wasn't. The next part of that was, and this was, I don't know if they still do it, but it was a University of Michigan customer service satisfaction survey. And they used to do it by industries. healthcare was below the IRS in customer satisfaction. So I
Right.
said, here's the problem. We're the tallest man in a group of short people. We can go over the bar and you can put the crown on your head and wave the trophy that we're in the top 10% of community hospitals. The problem is that even the IRS and the airlines had a better satisfaction rating for employees.
Right. You know what? So that's a great. Again, if you go back to say metrics and some of the places where we fall short, either in HR or whatever, the worst word in HR for me is unique, and it will like that. Oh, that sounds good, but we're in the fill in the blank industry. We're unique. We're different. And it's surprising that we break up into factions, and a lot of it may be valid where you're like, we're looking for best practices or benchmarking or whatever within our industry because it's similar, which is totally cool. Go ahead and do that. But if you flip it around and say hiring is just growth hacking, growth hackers look for ideas outside of their industry. They steal and borrow every idea from everywhere. When somebody new comes along and presents an idea to them, instead of instantly saying, well, that won't work for us, I'm a software company and you're a manufacturer, they instead say, we're different. I wonder how we would change that idea to work inside our ecosystem. How would we change it to fit what we want?
Yeah,
But that's
exactly.
not the feedback you get from most industry leaders or people in industry, especially when it comes to hiring and management at big companies. They instantly carve up and say, we're better than all the hotels or we're better than all the hospitals, instead of saying, I wonder how a tech company would approach this.
I wrote about that in my book, and I heard this as I was writing it. I heard Jeff, and I met him, and we've stayed in contact. Jeff Hoffman, who was the co-founder of Priceline. Now he's got a company, Color Jar. Does a lot of philanthropy work. Great guy. Follow him on LinkedIn. Amazing what he's doing with his success and helping people. But he used the phrase info sponging. And they said, they talked about habits that he got into. And one of his habits was, and that's how he came up with the idea for Priceline. That's how he got involved with it, is that he saw that somebody else had excess inventory. And I don't remember if it was a retail story or whatever. He says, so I wonder what airlines and hotels do with excess inventory. Because retail sells it off.
Right.
You got Ollie's and you got all these discount stores. I wonder how that could work in hospitality or travel. And they came up with that idea. So every day his habit is he wakes up in the morning and one of the things he reads is something in an industry that has nothing to do with what he's doing.
Right.
And just as you said, I read it, he picks up an idea and says, how would that work in my ecosystem? Classic story, he referenced this and it wasn't from him, is that drive-ins, fast food, McDonald's in the 1950s. We're going to have people drive up, and people laughed at him. Nobody was going to do that. Obviously, big success. But banks said, people want to come in. We're open 9 to 3. You have to come in until somebody tried a drive-through.
Right. Because it was the best practice. The definition of best practice is not what the consumer wants. It's not what will the world want. It's not where will we be in 10 years. Best practice is the agreed upon industry way of doing something. And if the industry is wrong, there's actually this cycle. It's basically like the big dogs at the top set the best practice. What the big dogs want is everybody to follow them, because the best practice in any industry plays into the hand of the best companies in the industry. They're the best at it. They have economy of scale, all that kind of stuff. So when you're the small guy, I like using David and Goliath. You're the small guy, you show up, you pick up Goliath's sword and you pick up Goliath's shield, you're going to lose. Every time you're going to lose. But in your mind, you're like, this is industry best practice, and this is what big companies do. It's actually not. So big companies use job boards. So little companies should use something else. But not if you dismiss everything I say. If you instantly say, well, we don't have as many employees, so employee referrals won't work as well. No, that's BS. I can get employee referrals from 5. So we're at 140 employees right now at Apple.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Employee referrals are our number one source of hires. If Indeed went away tomorrow for us personally at our company, we would be fine. Employee referrals are something like 80% of all hires.
Probably most companies, by the way, after we showed them some of these stats.
Maybe, because not always. The problem is that most companies don't believe that they could impact employee referrals and they do it the wrong way. And so it leads, unless they get lucky. And there's some lucky situations that happen if they have a great place to work, or especially young kids, right? If you're 16 to 20, you want to work with your friends. And so it's like a virus spreading. You get one kid who goes and works at the local like McDonald's, suddenly all of his friends move there. And when that kid, that like influencer of like teenagerdom, when he leaves and goes somewhere else, all his friends migrate. But what employers are doing right now is allowing that to spread on its own. They're not controlling it. But if you actually step in and say, no, again, we go back to the premise at the beginning. If I believe I can impact the result, then I start proactively trying to pull my levers for how I impact it. For me, we're 140 employees and we're 80% female. For a tech company, that's insane, right? And I'm not talking like support people. My salespeople are 80% female. My product managers are 50% female. Everybody outside of programming, my everybody with a C in their name except for me is a female, right? Nice. And so how do you drive that? It's not just assuming employees will refer people. It's just not.
Right. Well, it's part of your culture. It's part of your messaging. It's part of your plan.
For me, it's easier than that. Clearly you create a great place to work, but creating a great place and a great product. So we as a good example, we still don't have a 401k. I've been asked for a 401k forever. I do not have a 401k. What I do have is house cleaning. I pay $100 per month to every employee to do house cleaning. House cleaner comes and cleans up their house. It's outrageous. I could just give them $100 and it would be whatever, right? But if you think about what house cleaning is, it is a very targeted guilty pleasure for a working female, period, end of story. They probably won't buy it on their own if I gave them $100. It is an experience that happens when they have a crappy day at work and they come home to a clean house. It's a shareable experience, and that's why I told them when I rolled it out, I said, here's all I ask. When the housekeeper comes by, post it on Facebook. And you can say, man, I had a terrible day at work. My boss was a total jerk. Whatever you want to say, but then he cleaned my house for me. That's all I ask. And so what you will get is a shareable event that's very targeted towards a target demographic that I recruit from, working moms and moms returning to the workforce, that as soon as my employees share a job, almost every job that gets shared, there will be a comment on Facebook that says, wait a minute, is this a place that pays for your house cleaning? Just magnet, right? Yeah. Applicants flow in like crazy. It isn't the money. There's actually a study, if you take employee referrals, which by far, employee referrals, if you can pop up that like overall thing of like either applicant
this
pro
one?
or the one with the data I gave you.
Oh, the slides? The
overall data. Yeah, kick over to the overall. Keep going. Grab the one that has like 2 or 3 million applicants number on the top.
Yeah, I don't know if I got that one. Did you? Okay, I don't know if you sent it to me.
Yeah, so look at this data as a good example, and what we're looking at.
There might be another one that has some bigger numbers. Hang on a minute.
Yeah, find me something with some giant numbers, right?
I don't.
We can look at So think about.
Yeah. Okay.
This is fine. So think about the conversion rate as being. We don't want to track views, and we don't want to track starts or completes even. While those are good numbers, those aren't the end result. And in my world, growth hacking, we always have to pick our number one number that matters. And the number one number that matters in applicant flow or in sourcing is qualified applicants per job. What gets us the most qualified applicants? And a qualified applicant is somebody that we would hire or at least interview. So most companies will look at their sources and say, what's our best source of applicants? And instead of bringing it down and saying, what's our best source of qualified apps or interviews or especially hires, the companies that are doing it right should find that Indeed and free job boards are the best source of applicants, but their best source of hires should almost always be employee referrals and their own website. Right. And clearly some companies are better with their own website than others if your fans are also potentially customers. So credit unions and restaurants and those types, like you think restaurants and hotels hire similar people. The biggest difference is that hotel customers are not potential job seekers for them, but restaurant customers are, right? And so if you think like this is probably a good segue into certain sources. I love job boards. I love Indeed. We could do like a whole day worth of podcast on how to maximize the applicant flow from Indeed and make sure that it's the highest quality possible. But if you think about some easy wins, some of the easiest wins that don't cost money would be, say, like your company website and Facebook page. Most employers make it like almost like a gauntlet or a maze that you have to run just to find their job openings. I mean, you like one of my favorite clients actually have the data and they're phenomenal, but it's now like 4 clicks and you have to scroll halfway down a page and look for this really small link to find the link to their list of open jobs. Right. And the reason why that happens, this data right here, if you want to know what you really use this data for that shows you applicants versus hires and the best source of hire, the one that says company website, you print that out and you show it to your management team and you call out your marketing team and you say, look, we generate phenomenal applicants from our website, not very many of them, but the chances of them being hired, like this right here, 36% chance of somebody coming from our website being hired versus a minuscule, like, what is it, 2% from Indeed.
Right.
So if that's true, if we get awesome applicants from our website, then why is it so hard to find the job openings? But nobody makes that case. And so I look at this report right here as a great way to say, I'm going to go make a case to improve the number. I'm going to get with management, and the next time I hear we have a talent shortage, I'm going to whip this up and say, why is it so hard to find our jobs on our website when they are a 1 to 3 hire ratio? Why are you making it so hard?
Right.
And it's because marketing's job is generating leads for the company, not for generating job seekers, because nobody's made the case for why it's their job.
Well, and I think there's a couple disconnects because oftentimes I would say, well, marketing, from your company website, it's how would they find that? And I say, well, you work with marketing. Well, marketing doesn't return our calls. So walking with data like this and say, this is what I need to your CEO, and it's a pretty convincing story.
Yeah.
You started out saying metrics aren't the solution. Metrics aren't the solution at all. But if you don't have if you're not tracking the problem, if you're not tracking where people are coming from, you just start spending it. What I thought was interesting here was look at Indeed. I mean, they had 91 people. I'd want to know how much they spend to get those 91 views. And that obviously could be, the more they spend, the higher it's going to be. But how much did they spend? But they got 0 hired. I see that consistently across all these reports. I don't want to keep flashing different screens here, but essentially, Indeed sponsored doesn't necessarily give you any higher rate of hires than just Indeed, the general platform.
Well, so an interesting thing, one thing to be cautious about with this is a great example. There's actually 2 problem sets. Number one is I just did a study. I probably studied like 10,000 applicants. 10,000 people, 40% had been marked as hired that were actually hired. I knew they were hired because somebody shoved them through the onboarding platform, so they got to payroll, but nobody went and flagged them as hired. So no matter how good your reporting is, if you don't walk through and say, wait a minute, if we don't mark people as hired, then that's a problem. And HR might look at it and say, well, it doesn't matter because they got in payroll, so we don't care. Well, but all your metrics are now wrong. They aren't showing truly.
Right. Yeah. So here's the reverse. Let me make sure I get the right slide. Right. So here's one. I mean, so we get, they track good starts, good completion rates here, met minimum requirements. These aren't helpful if everybody's getting through, by the way. So maybe you need to look at your minimum requirements. But then you start looking at these rates, and they're frankly not filling them out. They're just not adjusting the status. And it's a click. It literally is a click to fill those out. And I asked you that question right before we even got on, we started the broadcast. What percentage of clients actually use the simple data? And if we go back to all you have to do is track 6 things, and 3 of them are done automatically. I mean, the reality is completed applications is easy, met basic qualifications is automatic. This is tracked automatically. So if you're using a platform like Applicant Pro or Preview APS, and I know there's some other ones that probably do it. Not all of them do it, though. They don't track the starts. But forget the views. I mean, because if you're getting enough flow through here and you can fix that, then you've got your interviews. All you have to do, all a recruiter has to do is say, hey, we schedule them for an interview. And then when they're hired, how many hired? And I know this isn't part of your system, but I actually have a couple clients that I've recommended that they do like a 1 month check or a 3 month check or a 6 month check. So in the status, all you have to do is go back into the system, although this was primarily designed not as a talent management system, but more as an ATS. You can go back and find what the retention rates are.
Oh, sure.
After a particular time. So this may change. Maybe we got a third, we got 1 out of 3 people coming through the company website, but then it's even more important. How many people stay with you on an employee referral or a company website versus some of the job boards? That may even be more significant. You can hire people, but if they don't show up after 3 days, it's not that good of a metric.
Yeah, and you could technically do that in pretty much any ATS system with a status tracking. You go in and you basically add like however many you want. I would probably add something like 3 extra statuses, and my statuses would be something like you move them into hired, and then I would add failed 30, failed 90, and like failed 1 year. And you're basically saying, hey, this person failed in the first 30 days, and this person failed in the first 90 days. This person failed in the first year. And maybe your 4th one is like failed more than a year or something like that. But then, you would be able to track failure back to source and back to those kind of things. The big key and the problem set to be careful is you have to be careful that you apply too much power to say the source, to wake up and say, well, our fail rate on Indeed is much higher. Now, clearly, the failure rate of employee referrals will be lower. And I believe that there's data out there, and you can go and find it, that would say employee referrals and company website have the 2 lowest fail rates compared to, say, job boards. But it's not Indeed's fault. It is more about, look, based on this, it's because people who come from our website are our fans. They searched for us. They didn't go to Indeed and search for a job. They came to Google. They probably went to Google and searched for our own company. They have a connection with us, so they want to work for us. People who come from an employee referral have a friend at work. Now, if you take each of them, so I don't like using it saying this tells me what source to use. I segment them out and say, okay, well, how might we improve the chances of somebody coming from a job board of staying? Well, if employee referrals stay because they have a friend, then how do we get people to have friends at work that come from the outside in? And you could go solve that problem. But I think that it probably comes down to what the point of metrics is. And there's one awesome quote. I use it all the time. I was trying to look up to see where it came from. But it's this. It's without metrics, you're just another person with an opinion. Right. And let's be honest, the HR person's opinion is probably the most discounted at the management table. So if you want to inflate the power of your opinion, bring a number. It doesn't even need to be a real number, right? I could walk in and say, and add a couple decimal points. Clearly, if you get past 2 decimal points, you seem excessive like an accountant. But if you keep it at like 1 to 2 decimal points, if I say, well, 90% or about 90%, blah, 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 that's better than not using the number. But a precise number increases the trust of what you say. If I show up, I could show up in the middle of nowhere and be like, 92.5% of applicants come from X, and everybody would listen to me and go, he said 92.5, right? Clearly he must have read it because he used data. The problem set is that I'll give you a great example. I don't use metrics in decisions almost at all. I create metrics for my team so they'll trust me. I create metrics for my board so they believe what I'm doing. But I'm a gut, heart, inspiration's not the right word, right? But it starts with an I. That's the
intuition.
I am.
Intuition, yeah.
Right. I use my intuition to make these decisions. Now I use data to prove that it's right afterwards or to start making fine tunements. But when you start with nothing or a total mess, intuition's where it's going to be at until you start to get better data. But if you show up into these meetings and say, hey guys, employees will be happier, if you can't tie it to the business result and you don't use a number in what you say, there's half of the people in the room who won't listen to you. They don't trust your opinion because you don't have data to back it up. So bring some data to the table and be like, look at this data. I'll tell you, I could give you the actual chart for it like it's a Mad Lib. You walk in and you say, the world says there's talent shortage and we're struggling to get qualified applicants. I went through our data and here's what I found. An employee referral is X times more likely to get hired than somebody from a job board. The quality of these guys is X high. Now, instantly what you see is this major shift that nobody in HR has realized. But here's the secret. You ready? When sourcing comes from job boards and when the entire company believes that's where it comes from, when we don't get applicants, it's your fault. It's your job to go fix in HR because job boards is an HR function. When I change it and say my hires come from employee referrals in the company website, well, the company website's a marketing function and employee referrals is all of our functions. Immediately it shifts when a sales manager comes to me and says, hey, why don't we get enough qualified applicants? I go, I don't know. How many did you refer last week? How many did your team refer last week? Because when sourcing equals employee referrals, then sourcing becomes a team sport. And actually, the HR person has less power to impact it than the sales manager does for sales jobs because he manages all the salespeople. They know other salespeople and they can refer them. And so that data of being able to set the tone and command respect, command that people listen to you, I can tell you, you throw some numbers and whatever you say, just throw a number in the mix. Don't even research it. Don't even have a right number. Just test this out. The next time you say something, throw a number in there. Add at least 1 decimal point. 96.5, people will listen to you even though you're utterly wrong.
Well, and hopefully people just aren't going to go out and make up numbers because the reality is HR collects more data than anybody can collect. Everything we talked about today is being collected in one form or fashion.
Right.
In fact, Indeed probably knows how many people start your applications and how many people complete them. You don't, but they do. I mean, the data's there, so part of it is...
Technically, you could install Google Analytics. Anybody could install Google Analytics for free on their career site and look for starts and completes and instantly have the data that says, here's where half of our applicants are.
That's a great segue. That's actually my topic at the Sherm Talent. It's how to use Google. Basically make your recruitment process. That's not the, I can't remember the exact title, but it's basically how to make your recruitment process Google friendly. Right. And it has anything to do with how do you better utilize Google, Google for Jobs, Google My Business, search, but even tools like analytics. And the crazy thing is people say, well, we don't have that in our budget. It's zero cost. Everything, almost every fix that and again, when I say fix, they're minor tweaks. They're not huge macro solutions, but every fix that I offer doesn't cost anything or it's nominal. I mean, some of them are like $9 a month. I mean, so everybody looks for these investments and we're going to tag this on, or we're going to switch ATS, or we hired a new person that's responsible. And the fixes are sitting, they're hidden in plain sight.
We know why this is. There's a couple reasons for it. Number one, most people focus on the top of the funnel. They believe that in order to increase sourcing, what our number we should track is how many job boards we post to. That is the worst number on the face of the planet. Track the visitors on the job boards you post to, because you'll quickly throw away most of the job boards because they get no visitors, right? But so that they focus on the top of the funnel, not conversion in the funnel. So the top of the funnel would be how many people see our ads, or how many people are on the job boards where our ads go. Conversion would be, well, what percentage of people who see it actually start applying, meaning does our ad suck? Conversion would be how many people start versus finish. Is our process creating friction? But nobody looks at conversion yet. Usually conversion optimization costs nothing except for brain power and audacity. Right.
So I mean, you talked about this funnel before, and again, you and I can talk for hours and days, on this. So, and we got to wrap up because we're going to get kicked off shortly. So we've, as I said, I always say about 30 minutes, and I've yet to accomplish that because I've got great guests and we talk about things that we're both passionate about. So we go through this funnel, and to get more views is a marketing issue, and you need to understand that to get views to at least start to convert them to click to apply is oftentimes a marketing issue. It's what's the job description look like? Is it appealing? Is it easy to find? Those are marketing issues. Soon as they start to apply, it's now an HR issue because it has to do with the application. It has to do with how quickly did we respond to them. It has to do were we prepared for the interview? How often do we communicate with them? So somewhere down that funnel, and basically they throw everything over to well, Indeed's going to do our marketing. What's your marketing plan? Indeed. No. What's your plan? Applicant Pro. No. That's not it, because you have all these other pieces part of that. So we again, we can go on. We've got a lot to talk about. I'm just going to throw this slide up again because I think it's important. Kind of an easy takeaway. I would, ideally you would look at the views as we just talked about for marketing. But again, if you're not tracking how many people start an application, I would. If you have a good completion rate, then that's not your problem. But if you have a 92% or a 90% or a 50%, fallout rate, that's an area to work on. You may be getting enough qualified people, but you're losing them in the funnel, that conversion rate. If you got 100% people meet your basic qualifications, well, that's not helping you. I mean, obviously, you may be doing a great job marketing, but that you may want to look at that. But how many people are scheduling for interviews? If you have a big drop-off rate between here and here, then maybe you're targeting the wrong area. You get completed applications, but maybe it's too easy. If you're coming in the interview and you don't get enough hires, maybe it's an interview process. Maybe your hiring managers aren't prepared. Maybe it took 2 months to call them back. By the way, which reminds me, going back to my client, is 2 things that they found. We talked about the 5-page application, which is just way too long, too involved, impossible. The second thing was people weren't calling back the people that applied. Now this is, remember, under 1.6 unemployment, healthcare, they were taking 4 to 8 weeks to contact that person. They already they had 1 or 2 jobs since then. It was that crazy. So basically you can start identifying where the breakdown was. And that's immediately they discovered that. Once we fixed this part, they discovered that there was a long delay, and they made it not mandatory, but there were incentives put in place that every person who applied was contacted within 1 day, and an attempt to interview those people was done in 3 days. And that's what they measured. And it didn't solve their problem because there is a shortage of people and they're growing, but they don't have the problem that they had 2 years ago. And thanks to again, I'm going to thank you. I mean, it was your system that helped me track it. It didn't solve it, but it was just easy to use. Final words. We got about 3 minutes here to close up shop.
Yeah, I want to give some hacks. I mean, clearly, so hacks we'll call them cheat codes, right? One of the downsides of metrics is that most employers look at that and say, well, if we don't have metrics, then there's nothing we can do about it.
Right.
We got to wait to track. We got to go gather information. So I'm going to actually give you the metrics I know. If you kick back over that chart, I will give you the metrics I know and tell you what to do to track it. Yep, right here. So you ready? I'm going to go through each one of these and I'm going to tell you what the metrics is. Generally speaking, views to start is less than 10%, meaning 90% of people who view your job ad don't actually start applying. 90%. Here's the hack for it. Throw away your job description and write a job ad. Just go read the ad and ask yourself this one question. Does this make it sound like the grass is greener on our side of the fence than where these people are standing now? And I almost guarantee you will say no. You need to make it sound like you are a great place to work. Forget the job description. Put it as a link. Nobody will read it anyway. But write an actual ad. If you want, I can give some descriptions. But that right there, we see 50 to 300% increase in applicant flow by changing the ad, right? Start versus complete. The industry standard, what you'll see across the board if you have a long application, is 50 to 60% fallout. There's a funnel graph that you could post on from the system that tells you where, but I'll just give you the cheat code here. The cheat is that nobody wants to give you their references at the point of application because they don't know you. It's a first date and it's too soon to meet my parents. They don't want to give you references and they don't want to give you full employment history. They don't. And it's not unqualified people. This is qualified people. And the higher you get from a professional standpoint, the more likely they don't want to. If you'll move those later in the process, you'll double your applicant flow.
Yep.
Those 2 hacks are the best hacks known to man right there. Rip out the employment history and education requirements, the employment history and references, and change your job ad to sound appealing. Heaven forbid you write a job ad that actually makes people want the job, right?
You've been well. I know we have similar trains of thoughts, but I'll jokingly say that you've been listening to my talks because I spend a lot of time on the application. Needs to be reworked. We're not talking to hire people just on their name and where they graduated school. But the reality is most of the information that you ask up front isn't going to help you qualify the person. You don't need the street address of the 3 employers ago. It just doesn't matter. You don't need their high school principal's name. A lot of these applications, the application in effect was from 1950.
Oh,
Um,
the address and phone number of everywhere they've worked before.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, so I walk through that. Just kind of a shameless plug here. That's what I talk about in the in my recruiting in the age of Googlization online course in the hub. We talk about how to redo this. Talk about job descriptions. So copy paste your job description. How do you write a story? Kind of messaging. What's the ideal way to do that? Post it. Some basic search engine optimization things. So some very easy things you can do. Low cost, doesn't basically little expertise that you need, and you can really hotwire your recruitment process. So, hey, Ryan, this is great. I've been trying to nail this down. Even when we're at conferences, we're too busy to talk to each other. So this was a good way to be able to do that. Really appreciate what you do and for your help. By the way, that one slide graphic that I was supposed to put up, I never got from you. So if you want to share that with me, yeah, that'll be great. And I'll use that in a future article or something. So that'll be fantastic. But appreciate it. So just to make sure, let's get this down here again. Ryan Kohler from Applicant Pro. Let me find out where his banner is here so I can show you that. There he is. Okay. And again, thanks for everybody who was watching or who's watching in the future on the replay. YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. I don't remember who my schedule is next week, but if you go to googlizationnation.com, every week I send an update out with who was on the past week or the past few weeks and who's going to be on upcoming week. Tomorrow, Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization podcast. That's just audio, so you can listen to it anywhere or on any of the podcasts. I'm going to be talking with, just had a brain freeze. Oh, Bill, tough name. Bill Coletti. We're going to be talking about the coronavirus, its impact on culture, employment brand, talent acquisition. We're not going to get into the health precautions too much, but he's a crisis management and what messaging you should be sending out to your employees and your customers. And ensure kind of a smooth, this is new. We're treading new ground here. Very much. And hopefully our president's right that it'll blow over, but just in case it doesn't go as quickly and easily and passively, there are things you need to do, and I'm sure we'll have another crisis, so that'll be helpful. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody who is watching. And again, if you want to watch the replay, it'll be on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Have a great day.